Хотел. Okay. Thank you. Why is it fake? Okay. Oh, David. Oh. So, dear guests, actually we are 35 minutes late for the program. So I would appreciate all the delegates to enter the hall so we would continue. So the next session, it is session number 3, which relates to the financial sustainability of protected areas and creating the networks for protected areas connectivity. So we would like to highlight that with this session, we would like to underline once again that not only protected areas are the habitats and territories which ensure the well-being of our flora and fauna, but also there is a lot depending on the connectivity of these protected areas. Thus, we highly appreciate the support of our donor partner organizations who assist us to develop these territories beyond the protected areas as well. I mean, the eco corridors, I mean, the OSCMs and some other territories. With this speech, I'd like to ask Ms. Maka Bitsadze, the Regional Conservation Manager of WWF, to present a short presentation, and still I would like to ask to take the relevant chance. Thank you.
So thank you, Tamar. So it's a pleasure to be here and spend the day with you. My pleasure also to present my organization and to bring one more challenging issue for discussion. So this presentation, so it's on, right? So I'll start this session with a presentation which touches upon the ecological connectivity. That goes beyond the protected areas, really just bringing a new challenging topic for today, but it's really luxury to have such a rich and diverse audience with a rich knowledge on protected areas and good opportunity to raise the issue of connectivity. About this content of connectivity, and also I'll just spend a few minutes to share with you some steps and projects WWF is implementing in the region to promote the ecological connectivity between protected areas. And very briefly, WWF having the history of over 25 years working in the South Caucasus with a large conservation portfolio, mainly focused on development of protected areas, species conservation, forestry, and freshwater. About the content of my presentation, we will briefly arm shops. Okay, so, sorry. Okay, Madlova. Yeah. To touch generally ecological connectivity is a term as such, and then to talk about the challenges in connectivity conservation, to talk about the momentum for connectivity conservation, because the global momentum which really somehow shapes and guides and provides a guidance how to deal with the connectivity conservation at national and regional levels. Then we have a few slides about the promoting ecological connectivity in the Caucasus, and particularly with the concrete examples of connectivity project in the South Caucasus. And then we have last slide, a few seconds about the reflections and considerations fully based on our experience on the ground while working on conservation of connectivity. So ecological connectivity, very briefly, we all know the audience, we have the knowledgeable audience, but just to remind ourselves, ecological connectivity, which is very important, and which is, sorry, I need to fix my, Okay, key for integrity of large conservation landscapes, for movement of wildlife, for healthy ecological processes, saving biodiversity, saving ecosystem services, and ultimately supporting ecosystems and large landscapes to be resilient to climate change. So in 2020, Convention on Migratory Species, CMS, adopted the definition of ecological connectivity. I would like just to read this definition, which was adopted in 2020: the unimpeded movement of species and flow of natural processes that sustain life on Earth. And here I would like to take just 2 or 3 minutes and to watch together a very nice animation, which was formally officially launched today by WWF. And this video was commissioned by the Wildlife Connect initiative. This is a joint initiative of WWF, Large Conservation, Landscape Conservation Society, and IUCN group, specialist group on conservation connectivity. Let's take 2 minutes to watch this video. How should I launch? Yeah, it's video, but I cannot launch it. Could you please just push the button at the bottom, yeah? Ხმასა უწევთ. Okay, so that's this should come with some nice sounds, but so I guess so it talks about the importance of connectivity, how connectivity is important for movement of wildlife and sustaining healthy ecological processes, and what does it mean to lose the connectivity? To lose the connectivity, what does it mean for nature and for people at the end, and how it alternatively impacts the resilience of large conservation landscapes to climate change. That's the whole idea of this video. Sorry for that, but we have checked it. And then it tells us there is increasing evidence how losing of wildlife caused by fragmentation of ecosystems ultimately decrease the ecosystem services, destroys the ecosystems, and impacts largely on ability of ecosystems to adapt to climate change. That's the whole history of this video, and sorry again, just provided this explanation. Okay, let's move. So where is the challenge actually? Challenge is a fragmentation of habitats, but also challenge is increasing challenge is isolation of protected areas. In many places, protected areas are no longer considered as enough to deliver their conservation objectives and deliver conservation impact in long term at a larger scale. They're increasingly becoming isolated and isolated protected areas. Response for isolated protected areas. This is connectivity, to restore the connectivity. Connectivity which we mean defining, maintaining, restoring, enhancing connectivity between protected areas. And this is a direct countermeasure to address the fragmentation. And I would like to refer here Protected Planet Report 2020, And according to this report, around 7%, over 7% of the terrestrial area is covered by connected, protected, and conserved areas, which is quite beyond and less than half of the protected area coverage, which is over 16%. The importance of safeguarding ecological connectivity is receiving increasing attention in the world, and there are reflection in multilateral environmental agreements, and there is a reflection in sustainable development goals, 2030 agenda. And I will not go into details, but here on the left side, you will see the list of multilateral environmental agreements, CMS, Convention on Biological Diversity, Ramsar Convention about the wetlands of international importance, Climate Change Convention, Convention Compacta Certification, and UNESCO. So all these conventions very largely embedding the issue of ecological connectivity. And especially we will come back to this issue under the CBD. As well as ecological connectivity as a part of the 2030 agenda. So it's a part of 6 global goal of 2030 agenda. And I will not go again into details, but you'll see all this information on the screen here. So in addition to that, I would like just to refer developments of 2021 and 2022, how connectivity issue was largely reflected in the global agenda. The first one I would like to touch upon, this is the United Nations General Assembly's resolution, which encourages members to maintain and enhance the connectivity of habitats. Then that's 2021 G7 Leaders Summit, which refers again this connectivity of protected areas and other effective area-based conservation measures as a part of 2030 Nature Compact. Then the 5th UN Environmental Assembly 2022 adopted its ministerial declaration, and it talks about the promoting ecological connectivity. And finally, 15th Conference of Parties of Convention of Compacta Certification, it talks again the connectivity of ecosystems, acceleration commitments to achieve the lead degradation neutrality by 2030. So that's and finally, very important is the Convention of Biological Diversity. It's a part of Kunming Modern Global Biodiversity Framework, which was adopted in 2020. And the ecological connectivity is part of Goal A, targets 2, 3, and 12, and especially important, which touches the protected area issue, that's a target 3, which says that by 2030, at least 30% of terrestrial inland water and coastal and marine areas, especially areas of particular importance, should be effectively conserved and managed through ecologically representative, well-connected, and equitably governed systems of protected areas. Yeah. So from this perspective, large landscape ecological networks are expected to address this issue, and ecological networks are an indispensable role in conserving the 30%, because there are no expectations to have 30% protection. So this is the 30% of ecological networks, which includes protected areas, other effective conservation measures, AKA conserved areas as we call, and also ecological corridors. So there is an increasing understanding of the importance of safeguarding of ecological connectivity, and this is kind of shift in conservation practice. I would not say it's shift fully, but it's a complementary action in conservation practice when we need the action, planning, thinking at a larger spatial scale, at which actually species and ecological processes operate, right? As island type of protected areas, in many cases, because of their size and environmental conditions within, they're not enough to sustain wildlife populations and sustain healthy ecological processes. So what developments we have in the region in promoting ecological connectivity in the Caucasus? The first, I would like to refer the Regional Conservation Plan for Caucasus. That's the edition of 2020. That's the document around over 150 experts from 6 countries work together to develop the Caucasus Eco-Regional Plan. This is a plan which covers the whole Caucasus ecoregion, and also mentioned by colleagues that this is a part of biodiversity hotspots, among 36 biodiversity hotspots identified by Conservation International in the world. The uniqueness of the ecoregional conservation plan is that it fundamentally brings a new understanding of the large landscape conservation vision. It brings a concept of large conservation landscapes and bridging landscapes. And also, excuse me, it brings understandings of ecological connectivity, and also somehow defines a way, or provides a roadmap how to develop ecological network and how to ensure connectivity between protected areas. And let me share the maps from the ecoregional conservation plan. So ecoregional conservation plan defines you see on the right hand from your side 13 large conservation landscapes, and you see these yellow shapes, and 7 bridging landscapes. And on the left side, you see key biodiversity areas which have been identified based on IUCN guideline, areas which are important for persistence, very important and crucial for preservation of species globally threatened, right? So defining large conservation landscapes, we have the key BAs, and then also this document brick analysis, how protected areas sit within large conservation landscapes and how this overlays with identified key BAs. So this is a kind of guideline for future building of ecological networks and ensuring the conservation. To bring this just clear picture, what's the situation currently in terms of protected areas in the South Caucasus. Here you see the South Caucasus picture. That's a map, and you see the coverage of protected areas by countries, and overall the South Caucasus territory, 11% of the area is covered by protected areas, but as for the connectivities, this is not really field addressed in the region. So we are quite good in terms of enlarging protected areas in the region, in terms of coverage. Only in Georgia you see, and it was mentioned today morning, that it's almost over 13% covered by protected areas, but it's really important to address the connectivity issue to sustain the wildlife and ecological processes. What about the particular experience in the region in terms of taking steps towards ecological connectivity? Through financial support of German government, through KfW, we are working on building connectivity in 3 conservation landscapes, 3 pilot conservation landscapes, together with the governments in Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. So those 3 conservation landscapes, you see these green parts here. That's the Western Lesser Caucasus. This part. So Western Lesser Caucasus, Georgia, Eastern Greater Azerbaijan, and Eastern Lesser Caucasus, Armenia. Those are 3 pilot conservation landscapes we are prioritized for building the connectivity. Again, this uniqueness again of this project is that this is based on the inclusive conservation. The first important pillar for connectivity, identifying wildlife corridors, this is a priority species, globally or regionally threatened species. And based on priority species, habitats, and suitability analysis, we are defining ecological corridors. Next step, this is bringing local communities at the core of conservation, biodiversity conservation. We are not considering them as partners or people just involved and watching this conservation. They're part of conservation, and this is happening through conservation agreements with the local communities. The third very important is, together with local communities, in order to be our allies, we help them to have sustainable land use planning and promote sustainable use of land and natural resources. And finally, final consideration is that the social component of these local people should improve and not harmed with this project. So those are 4 pillars of ensuring the ecological connectivity in 3 large conservation landscapes. The first phase was completed in 2020, and up to date, over 90,000 hectares are already covered by community conserved areas through conservation agreements with local communities. And now we are in the second phase of implementation, and the plan is to cover the over 120,000 hectares with community conserved areas. Here you see more into details how it looks. Just to zoom in a bit, and just to be more clear, I can bring one map. So you see this example of Western Lesser Caucasus, Georgian part, and you see protected areas. Just let me. Borjomi protected area. Here coming this protected area, Nutrition Tirala, and here's the planning area protected area. And what we are doing is identifying wildlife corridor, and just to plan. I come back for that, and you see this pinkish area here. This is a community conserved areas. Just trying to cover this area and to ensure sustainable management of ecological corridors through community conserved areas. So this is just zooming the Georgian case of Western Lesser Caucasus. Just for translation, I just explained this is a Western Lesser Caucasus corridor, Georgian example, how to build the connectivity and ensure connectivity between existing protected areas. And I'm showing this protected, this blue one, this is a corridor building between green one, existing protected areas, and this pink color, this is the community conserved areas, building this corridor and covering this corridor through community conserved areas. And in Georgia, it's over 30,000 hectares covered already by community conserved areas, which is based on conservation agreements with local communities. And a few words about the reflections. This is really challenging project, multi-stakeholder process requiring long-term engagement and long-standing partnership. Engagement of multi-stakeholder, engagement of multi-stakeholder at all process and engagement at all stages of stakeholders, designing, planning, introducing, governing and managing, and all levels of individuals, communities, locals, central decision makers, policy makers, and scientists. And it's very important alignment of science policy, defining where connectivity conservation is critical, following the results of research, and where is feasible, and where we need more policy and legislation to ensure the sustainability. It's important to have the integration into spatial planning and sectoral development strategies, otherwise the sustainability is under question mark, and maintaining landscape connectivity through ecological corridors. This is exploring options for, we need to explore options for formalization of based on best practices, enhancing enabling environment for its efficiency and sustainability. And here we mean more enabling legal environment and enabling environment in terms of engagement of local communities and gets them ready to be part of the conservation. Yeah. Thank you, and yeah. Sorry, just I was in hurry as you asked, but yes.
Thank you, Ms. Maka, for a very nice presentation. So I'll try to be very, very quickly and just give the floor to the next speaker, Mr. Toby Aykroyd, the Director and Trustee for Wild European Foundation. We are really very excited to listen to this presentation.
Thank you. I'll use the microphone, I think. Thank you for being excited. That was very kind of you. And Gamma Chopper to everybody. It's my first and only word in Georgian, but delighted to be here. It's a real privilege. And I'm actually wearing two hats. One, as was just said, as director of the Wild Europe Foundation, but I also have the honor to be a founding trustee of FCC, Fundacja Conservation Carpathia based in Romania. And I'll come on to that in a moment because it's central to what I want to present here, which is this concept at this stage for a very large-scale project called Klima Carpathia. Just to have a look at the concept itself, whether you feel it could have any applicability here in the Caucasus, but equally to learn a great deal of what you've been achieving, the immense achievements that you have brought about in such a short space of time. It's really been a remarkable day listening to it all. So, an overview of Klima Carpathia. Well, starting off with the small task of looking to see if we can dedicate literally 50% of the Carpathian range. And as you'll all know, that curves downwards from Slovakia through Poland, Western Ukraine, chops around Romania itself, and then on into Serbia. That sounds a ridiculously ambitious objective. It most certainly isn't. It's actually equating only to a little over 6% of the 7 countries involved. It's addressing what are described as often the twin crises of biodiversity and climate change, but to which you can easily, if you live locally, add a third crisis, which is rural decline, rural poverty in a lot of areas. How can you bring all those together to work in a much more intertwined manner? And how can you do so in a way that member states feel they have full engagement and ownership of from the word go? This is still very much at its inception, but obviously it is essential that it is member state-led with European Commission support, with international support, and very much involving a mix, not particularly complicated, but fairly well-layered mix of public-private partnerships based on ecosystem services. Nothing new there. It's more the intensity and more the degree of the private-public interchange. And vitally, and this has come out throughout the day, very, very important to have strong local community support from the outset. Actual ownership rather than just being ticks in the box on the way to consultation. So the main objectives, pretty much as stated, reversing biodiversity decline through a large, really large network of strictly protected areas. Using that word advisedly, strictly protected. In other words, category 2 at least in IUCN parlance, and ideally 1B, i.e. full public access, but no extractive activity of any sort. Addressing climate change, which that strict protection actually dovetails in with very neatly, as Pato was explaining earlier, using the wilderness concept, through mitigation and adaptation. Sustainable regional economic growth, but in the proper use of that word sustainable. It's become, if you like, a word of convenience for many people to use according to what suits their agenda. Sustainable really must mean that in ecological as well as economic terms. And then this issue of scaling up what is already being done, what is already tried and proven, really to a whole new quantum level that can be applied across Europe and even, somewhat arrogantly perhaps, but globally. So the background to this, and you will know the Carpathians much better than I do, very big range, 17 million hectares, fantastic landscapes, and a lot, obviously a lot in common with the Caucasus in that respect. A high proportion of biodiversity-rich habitats, a lot of which are natural, but also a lot of semi-natural ones that will lend themselves to rapid and effective restoration. And critically, around 50% is forested. That's a very high proportion. And about 10% of the total forested area is actually old growth and primary. Very few other areas in Europe, and certainly not in Middle Europe, can claim that sort of natural heritage. On top of which, of course, the cultural heritage, very rich, very profound, again, very much like the Caucasus, some astonishingly long-lived roots in historical terms, and low population density, low income, traditional rural economy. So there you have it in a bundle, the opportunities and the challenges. So very much supported historically favorable policy context with the rather delayed awakening of the policy world to what is needed at a global and a national level. This 30 by 30 target that you've heard so much of, which again, it's great to have 30% protected, but what does it actually mean? So within that, honestly, the 10% strip protected, it's easier to aim for, it's easy to target, it's easier to monitor because the criteria are much tighter and much tougher. And that's something we need to take on board when we actually move on beyond that to the 30. It's underwritten by the EU Green Deal, which has some thoroughly dubious elements to it, not least solid bioenergy, but by and large is a terrific interface for business opportunity with ecological necessity. And it is nicely reflected on a global scale in the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration, with all the incentives that are being rolled out for that. Coming back to regional level, it is also nicely fitting into the framework of the Carpathian Convention, whereby every member state, every entity can operate its own independent tailored version, but there is that collectivity of decision-taking and targeting that is so very valuable, and particularly in respect to the vision that they have unrolled towards climate neutrality, climate resilient development, and this biodiversity strategy and how that's actually going to work in practice. And within that, this critical role again of the carbon-rich habitats. If we're going to hit that 55% Paris climate target, which is frankly looking increasingly unlikely, habitat plays an enormous role there. This is all predicated on an existing model. Alongside many other models, it doesn't claim any uniqueness, but there is a togetherness of the various facets which we feel could make it quite useful. And here I'm speaking completely on behalf of FCC itself. Aiming to create a 250,000 hectare national park, this project was initiated about 10, 11 years ago, so very recent in that respect, but already made really quite substantial strides. Purchased or had agreement to purchase about 27,000 hectares, a lot of it old growth forest, so not particularly cheap. 80,000 hectares of protected land in terms of hunting concessions being bought and cancelled. So overall, already a very, very strong basis for that ambitious target, and a balance sheet to boot, a little bit in excess of 100 million now already. Large-scale protection across a range of habitats, aiming at mosaics, not these blocks of different habitats, but mosaics, and as the biodiversity specialists among you will know, ecotones being such an important element in terms of biodiversity enrichment. Very strong support in many different ways for local community engagement through income and employment. And then a series of individual initiative groupings, as it were, the first of which is a trial carbon offset. We literally only started that this year. I hasten to add that is actually attached to a reducing ceiling. It's not just a license to pollute, as is sometimes feared, quite rightly, within the conservation sector. 57,000 tonnes per annum as a starter, which is a nice little cash earner to fund the rest of the initiative. Equally, that will be reflected increasingly, not just in the biodiversity grants, and the EC have been immensely generous to us in that respect, but the whole bio-credit system, which I'm not sure whether that's particularly been touched on. Tim Coles' concept that he's developed with the IMF and the World Bank. A whole system of quite complicated metrics for translating biodiversity enrichment into funding, literally, to support it and protect it. Then the more obvious, the well-established, the tourism revenue with all that goes with it in terms of infrastructure. Ancillary enterprise, particularly important, not in the core areas, which are as big a proportion of what we're protecting as possible, but in the ancillary areas, winning hearts and minds and helping to rebuild local effective productivity-driven economies. So actually showing a more profound care for the regional economy than simply driving it on the back of nature protection. That's gone down particularly well in winning community and broader political support, particularly in Bucharest. And then with it, there goes a whole welter of subsidiary. The Education Centre with quite a well-established education program. Welfare benefits, particularly important during COVID. And this whole issue of cultural identity, rediscovering it, reawakening it. and linking it to large-scale restoration, but with a historic and cultural context as well. So essentially, Carpathia, Klima Carpathia, is about scaling up this success. Coming back, this network of strictly protected areas. In terms of location, just one facet alone, of the 1.05 more or less gigatons that have been identified by Woods Hole in the States, 44% of that is in 25% of the area. That gives a very good starting point when you're actually designing where some of these extra areas are going to be. And then you've got the welter of the layered supports coming in behind that. Biodiversity grants, the private sector finance models for the payment for ecosystem services agenda. Have to add, eco-proofed against misallocation, and we'll come on to that in a moment, because there is still very widespread suspicion and reluctance to use ecosystem services with the private sector, because we lack the capacity in conservation to know which is good and which is bad and why. And that's a major problem that we need to overcome. And multi-benefit packages for large-scale EU grant engagement, I mentioned the generosity there. And then this very helpful framework for closer national cooperation. Prospective funding sources, we're short on time, so I'm not going to dwell here, but you can see breaks down quite neatly into multiple sources where one fails, runs out, or is particularly tailored towards a need. Others fill the gap. Payment for ecosystem services, well worth just dropping into there. Many aspects to it, but equally what I've chosen to call innovative funding at the bottom, blended finance involving bonds, even debt swaps, DFN, debt for nature. Lots of opportunity there in some areas. Actions to date, well, it is a new concept. As I mentioned, we held a conference, Wild Europe did, in Bratislava, hosted by President Chaputova, and a side meeting with the Carpathian Convention, Harold Eggerer, with FCC and ECC, European Parliament, directors, IUCN, WWF, CEE, really helpful, and Frankfurt Zoological Society. Strong support across the board for the whole concept, and a feeling critically that this is practical. It's not just pie in the sky scaling up for the sake of it. Practical and necessary. Produced a brief consultation document. We've had a meeting in Brussels with Umberto Delgado, who many of you probably know, who's head of the biodiversity team, Natural Resource Department, the engine for future growth and protection restoration. We've had a couple of trial dialogues with EC commissioners who've reported back to van der Leyen. Again, we've had quite positive reaction there. And then last month, introduced it in Belgrade to the 7 state ministries. Still waiting for feedback there, but by and large, some really quite helpful reactions. Next steps, well, as I said, at its inception, so we need feedback from the member states. We have raised enough funding to put in an interim coordinator with an oversight guidance group. And so we'll take the proposal further, request a full cost-benefit feasibility study from the EC, which is obviously the next step, but also evaluate its relevance for other regions. And by relevance, I don't just mean how the model applies to them, but as I said at the beginning, how we can learn, particularly of what you have created in such a remarkable way in such a short space of time in the Caucasus. So the relevance beyond, well, let's see what comes of it. Over here we have different actors, different sources of funding, slightly different biogeographic surroundings, but very much the same principles, same challenges, same opportunities. Wider horizons. A lot of the opposition to this really quantum expansion comes from traditional agriculture, traditional forestry. And here I think it's worth introducing a slightly new concept, and it actually shouldn't be new, which is that forestry, agriculture, and fisheries combined with solid bioenergy, which is wood bioenergy, represents less than 2.5% of the EU economy. And yet the impact of inappropriate management in those sectors, and of course we need healthy sectors, nobody's saying otherwise, but the impact of inappropriate management impacts on the other 97.5% of the economy. But if we're going to make that point, and if we're going to intertwine it with the way in which we represent this strategy and the policy requirements that go with it, we need to change a few things. We're not just thinking big, but there are skills capacities that need gearing up. Very much the skills that have been talked about so ably here. but lobbying skills, financial skills, economic valuation skills that go with this and reinforce what are still the fundamental ecological principles, not compromised in the slightest by the pairing with economic aspects, but absolutely essential if we are to create what I call the ecological economy, based, again, another critical new development on new alliances. Conservation sector is not strong enough in lobbying terms on its own to push through these reforms. It needs new allies. Consumer organizations across Europe, far more powerful, far better funded, much better contacts, and a huge amount of common ground. Ditto with very large sectors of industry, who we have not chosen to approach simply because they are not in line for funding potential. Again, a lot of potential, even some of the taxpayer unions. Bring those in together and you're starting to reflect your relative economic power. Coming back to this issue of 2% versus 97.5%. And you're breaking this hugely disproportionate power of traditional sectors in Brussels and Strasbourg. So with all that, we come back to the global challenge, perhaps a little better equipped. And if you can sum it up in one very simple issue, it comes to the question, the challenge of how can we in the West, in Europe, ask Brazil as a much poorer country to set aside 25% of its area in pristine, undeveloped state, which we all know is required for tackling climate change. Ditto the Congo Basin, ditto what's left of, say, Indonesia, Irian Jaya, when we can't even reach 10%. That's not just pie in the sky, 10%, it is an absolute necessity. And it's one that we have a practical route to achieving quite quickly and quite effectively. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Toby, for a very interesting presentation. I've been practicing. I know that most of you would have a lot of questions regarding these presentations, but due to time limitations, I will just take some time to have it at the end of the session. Now I would like to invite Ms. Jessica Graham, the president of JJ Global Advisory, just to give her speech. The floor is yours, please.
Try to stay on time because I know it's getting late. Thank you all. Thanks to Georgia's APA and Ministry of Environmental Protection and Agriculture, as well as Global Conservation, to Jeff for inviting me here to speak with you all today. So I'm going to start with a map because a visual is always great. My name is Jessica Graham, JG Global Advisory, based in Washington, D.C. as a management consultancy. And we help organizations not only with business development, strategic policy planning, and project management across the Conservation Board, but we are helping conservation organizations around the world secure funding. So I just wanted to kind of paint the picture here and set the scene. We've talked a lot about 30 by 30 today and reducing risk, which you'll hear throughout this presentation. But we are at a 16% on protected areas on the terrestrial side and 8% on marine protected areas globally. And oftentimes when you establish protected areas, the work is just to begin. So I'm going to breeze through this because we've had a lot of conversations about these components already with regards to the Convention on Biological Diversity and the negotiations that adopted the framework, as well as a 30 by 30. Attached to these, and this is not an exhaustive list, but these attached to these are where the trickle down of funding occurs on a kind of international but global and regional scale as well. So target 3, the 30 by 30, and in the US, we've also committed to conserving at least 30% of US lands and waters by 2030 through the America the Beautiful initiative, which is the first ever national conservation goal for the United States. Attached to that, again, is the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, and that's an important outcome that will support implementation of ambitious goals and targets established under the the GBD framework. The US END Act, it was established in 2016 and required a task force that was actually developed several administrations ago. Under the Biden administration, the Task Force on Wildlife Trafficking was co-chaired by Secretary of State, Interior, and the Attorney General, and it brings together 17 government agencies. It was great in terms of coordination, communication, information sharing, but the reality of 17 government agencies is it's even more coordination needed, more communication required, and more information sharing that's critical. And of those 17 government agencies, really two main entities there have the funds. The Secretary of State's funding through the Law Enforcement Bureau, which is where I had originally worked in years ago, and the USAID that wasn't even a co-chair. They were just one of the major partners around the table. So what that meant was two major entities were funding global programs on broader conservation and biodiversity for the issue. In addition, the US has pledged $600 million to combat global environmental threats. And that's for the next 4 years for the GEF, the Global Environmental Facility, Cycle 8, which we'll show a brief slide on as well. The US joined 28 other donors in collectively pledging $5.3 billion to support GEF 8, a 31% increase over GEF 7, and GEF 8 funding for the biodiversity focal area increased significantly, totaling over $1.9 billion, which is a 49% increase over GEF 7. The EU biodiversity strategy is part of the European Green Deal. We've talked about that as well. The EU committed $7 billion of external funding to support biodiversity until 2027. That will translate into programs covering the spectrum of the global biodiversity framework, including attention to indigenous peoples, gender equality, and local communities. Another component that was briefly touched on earlier, but the EU's proposed nature restoration law that was adopted by Parliament in July of this year will set out a mechanism to halt and reverse biodiversity loss, and member states will have to design national restoration plans with binding restoration targets and measures to fulfill obligations by 2050. We haven't talked a lot about the marine stuff, so the Our Oceans Conference, it's been held for the last 7 years. It was held in Panama this year. The US committed another $800 million to protect our ocean areas, as well as $8 million under MPAs alone, marine protected areas. So, yes. So what you'll see as a common theme is there's quite a bit of funding that's been committed, but when you really peel back the onion, environmental funding is still falling short among other priorities. This is just an example. If you look across on the very far right, there's humanitarian assistance and health after the pandemic have taken prioritization. And State Department and AID, as well as Treasury, are some of the major efforts that they're pushing out on foreign assistance. This source is from foreignassistance.gov. But you can kind of see where environment falls. It's at 400 million. And within that, though, a lot of that is more on the climate change, clean energy, and electricity, smart energy, smart cities. So USAID in 2021 invested $319 million to conserve biodiversity, and that included wildlife trafficking and other nature crimes, and that was in more than 60 countries, with 56% of those funds going to 13 countries and regions, mostly Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Central Africa. Again, not exhaustive, but from the US side, Department of Interior has several, we've heard earlier today, several areas that do provide smaller grants. One's the ITAP, as well as Fish and Wildlife Service. They do more species-specific conservation grant programs around the world, and they're at smaller levels, multi-year projects. Department of State has several bureaus that fund on all of these issues. The common theme here is it may not be specifically protected areas per se at a bilateral level, which we do have. Obviously, the embassies around the world have some small amounts of funds that they can issue grants on protected areas in the conservation and econ section. But the Bureau of European and Eurasian Affairs has funded historically parts here as well in the region. And the INL Bureau, the Law Enforcement Bureau, has a $50 million annual program on countering wildlife trafficking, but that also includes ranger protection, equipping, training, other kinds of capacity building and technical assistance that goes forward for rangers and park management areas for protecting, as well as cross-border efforts. The other piece to this is the International Law Enforcement Academy. It's a 30-year program that they have their first ever was established. They're in 4 regions across the world. One is in Budapest, and they do bring law enforcement rangers and others to that training. There is Fish and Wildlife Service and U.S. Forest Service do provide some trainings to park managers, rangers, and others. So DEFRA. DEFRA has several different grant obligation mechanisms. 2 main ones that are kind of on an annual basis is the Darwin Initiative, as well as the Illegal Wildlife Trade Challenge Fund. The Darwin Initiative is broader biodiversity projects. They're also kind of smaller scale grants. And the IWT Challenge Fund is multi-year, smaller even than Darwin, but it's more specific and drilled down to illegal wildlife trade topics. But again, can be used to support efforts on parks and ranger support. So similar to what we saw with the US funding, the EU funding is mostly being spent on wastewater and waste, and this source is from Eurostat. The EU's expenditure on environmental protection rose by 24% between 2018 and 2022, with investments reaching 69 billion euros in 2022 alone. Of that funding, about 65% of that total is corporate funding. Biodiversity is about 4.4%. So there are several DGs in the EU system that are funding on small-scale grants. There's DG Climate and Agri, which I don't have on here, but was just discussed by our former speaker. The Commission for the DG Commission, EU Commission DG for Environment, has several grant programs available to nonprofit organizations working on these issues, as well as DG Mare on maritime affairs and fisheries. And then the EU Internal Security Funds has a much larger budget, and they fund, obviously their priority is counterterrorism, which may not resonate here, but they do have things on organized crime, which we heard from Jeff earlier today, on the organized crime efforts that happen on poaching and within parks oftentimes as a corridor. And so, you know, they have funded CWT programs as well. And frequently, most NGOs, conservation NGOs, are probably familiar here with the Dutch postcode lottery, but Swedish and other Norway postcode lotteries have grant programs and areas for supporting nonprofit organizations who are working in the green and social projects, social impact projects. I didn't discuss, but obviously Sweden, Germany, Norway, and others have been funding projects in these areas in this region on these topics. And I believe we have someone here from the Jeff, but just a quick topic on that. There's several focal areas there. Over the past 3 decades, the Jeff's provided more than $23 billion and mobilized $129 billion in co-financing for more than 5,000 national and regional projects. So they're at different types of projects, different focal areas. The IUCN, not government specific, but does have some great research grant opportunities as well, species specific or regional initiatives. And those are kind of the budget ranges. This is not government, but It is substantial and worth noting. It's a $10 billion over 10 years, and through Jeff Bezos' Earth Fund. It's on, the Earth Fund was created to kind of be dispersed as grants to address climate and nature. There's a huge tech component attached to that. There are organizations like WRI and WCS who have received some of those grants. So far, $1.84 billion was granted across 7 programs and 190 plus grants. So we talked a lot this morning on the opening remarks on reducing risk and the importance of that. Same goes for whether you're, like I was one of the major government donors on the issue globally years ago, and then I've also been on the implementation side at Interpol and elsewhere. And so, there are a small number of international donors and a limited amount of funding in this area, as you've seen. And there's few major recipients. So what does that equal for? It equals for a crowded and competitive space. So what are some of the solutions? I think public-private partnerships, collaboration is really critical when the space is so small. Because there's few major philanthropic and government donors in this area, the importance of diversifying revenue streams is also really critical and important. And that means we've had clients who've had like one major government donor and that was it, or had a few major philanthropic donors and that was it. And that is a huge risk. So the importance of diversifying those revenue streams as you would a personal stock portfolio. The other thing is not just diversifying the revenue streams, but oftentimes what we're being approached to support are philanthropic donors who are seeking their partner and their implementing partners on the ground get and secure government funding to help with reducing risk and increasing kind of the project sustainability. There's, the duplication of efforts occurs all around the world, I've seen. And so the importance of really coordinating, and it's not just a donor coordination effort that's needed, but it's the grant recipient coordination that's also needed that really can help with the deconfliction. And the impact narrative we've also seen, it's no longer about how many countries you're training or equipping or how many people are participating in an event. It's really about trying to differently quantify and qualify impact to again speak to reducing risk and to enhancing your project sustainability. And then of course having another challenge we've seen frequently is kind of a narrow or short-term vision. Oftentimes it's project managers who are running on the ground. They're parks, protected areas, and they're very kind of in a reactive mode, and they are seeking to be more proactive, but they're just trying to find funding to cover the immediate needs. So I think this is where the importance, the kind of solution to that is to kind of be bold and be creative in what you're going after. A lot of conservation NGOs in the area in Europe received EU ISF funding that we had helped with, and at first they were like, well, we're saving wildlife. How is this an internal security fund apparatus? In reality, it was, it was an organized crime element that was a priority, one of the top 3 priorities for the EU ISF. So, and they were able to receive funding. So it's things like that, to be creative and be bold and the opportunities that you're securing, and casting a wide net for those opportunities. So some of these are just to hopefully get the discussion started, and it was, I know, a lot of data for you, but I'm happy to answer questions afterwards and discuss further. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Jessica, very much. This presentation was really very interesting, particularly for those ones who work with international organizations and funds, also for NGO sector fundraisers and particularly, I also like this slide of challenges and solutions. Sometimes we usually are talking about challenges, but cannot find solutions. So this was really very nice just to summarize. So actually, according to our agenda, the next speaker is Mr. Jens Wunderlich, the head of Department of Protected Areas and Biosphere from Zuko Foundation, but unfortunately he couldn't come from Germany, and we will have his speech online tomorrow. So just that's why I want to quickly move to next session, session number 4, which is about leadership. And I would like to highlight that this is also a very important topic that we would like to draw our attention as leadership. This is a topic on which there is a paramount importance. How we manage protected areas, who are the leaders of these parks, and how we're gonna have the long-standing and long-term development perspectives of these parks. On these topics, I would like to ask Mr. Duff Morgan again, the Executive Director of Global Conservation, to make a very quick presentation.
Everyone awake out there? That's a hard day. Come on, let's go. I just wanted to, I think we're going to push the leadership with Jim and Mike Sutton a little bit. We're on the topic of money, and I think it's the most important topic because you can't run a park without money. A lot of these countries, Georgia's done a very good job. I think impressive model to raise money from the Germany and from NGOs like us. And like Jessica said, she said, have a bold target. They have a bold target. We're going to do 14 protected areas. That's a bold target. And so people are interested in helping that. CNF was organized to enable that. And so you need to have a bold target. You have to have a good structure. CNF provides that structure for multi-donors. And then you need to actually have many people, and go after many sources of funding. So we're going to talk about financial sustainability right now. Firth Griffith is an expert in financial options, including biodiversity credits and these other new instruments. I'm going to talk about something that's about 25 years old. It's called REDD+, Verified Carbon Standard, VCS. So the REDD+ VCS is very, let's see if we can get the slides up here. How many people know what REDD+ VCS are? Not so well known? Okay, so this was done by the United Nations 20 years ago to create carbon credits from forest, avoided deforestation. So you can earn money for your park with by protecting the forest, and the offset is if you didn't protect it, it would be cut, and we would have lost 20% or whatever the thing. We showed this slide earlier. There's huge opportunities in these countries for carbon credits because they are cutting down all their forests. But on the other hand, they're not getting it. These countries aren't getting any money because the bureaucracy of the country is so hard in Indonesia. The forestry minister is against the carbon credits. They don't know how to organize. Norway offered Indonesia over $1 billion, just like they did to Brazil, if they stopped cutting their forests. And Indonesia just said, no, thank you. So that was a complete failure. The money was there, but we're going to talk about a couple issues. So one is it's very complicated. To create a carbon project in Georgia, say for Racha or for Borjomi, it's 1,000 pages of planning. So the document's like this thick. That's a problem for many countries that don't have the technical expertise. It's going to cost to prepare the project for, say, 500,000 hectares or even 100,000 hectares. It's going to cost you over $2 million before you can sell one carbon credit. So you need to find this funding, and you may raise 20 to 30 million later. The other thing is, if you have large human communities, you have a lot of populations inside the park, around the park, it's much more complicated because they all need to sign off and approve this project. If the government's a big government like Indonesia, you have many bureaucracies and many signatures and many approvals, very complicated. United States, very complicated even. Where Georgia, Cambodia, I think you can get approvals maybe easier. The other big complication is the prices. The prices of carbon are going up and down, just like Bitcoin or something like that. So you're stuck. I'll give you one example of a great success in our projects is in Cambodia at Cardamom's National Park. It's a huge landscape, about 500,000 hectares, 500,000 hectares in Cambodia. Looks like this, just beautiful, has rivers, many villages around it, so it's been complicated to work on. And this is the project area. You can see in Cambodia, so it's in this little area of Cambodia. And this park's called the Southern Cardamons. And Wildlife Alliance and Wildlife Works worked on the project for 4 years. It took 4 years to develop this project, about $3 million to work with the government, survey all the land, talk to all the villages, the governors, the mayors, everybody, and put a project together. This is what, here's how you get the offset. So if you keep the forest, that's called avoided deforestation. But if you don't, what's going to happen is it's going to look like this. So your carbon offset is if it looks like this versus this. That's the offset. Okay, so if you can keep the forest looking like this, you get money. If it looks like that, then you don't get your money. In this park, it's beautiful. They got some tourism. But this is just one ranger station. These are chainsaws. So there's 13 ranger stations, 13 stations in the park. Here's Suwana. You were just asking about her. This woman's from San Francisco. She moved to Cambodia 12 years ago, 15 years ago, and opened up Wildlife Alliance. And they're getting thousands of chainsaws and shutting down all these illegal activities. It's just Cambodia is really tough. But one of the things she did very smart was develop a VCS project for the Southern Cardamons. And that now cost them $2 to $3 million, but they have now achieved over $40 million now for the country. So this park has $40 million over 10 years. So that's a really big difference. That helps pay for the rangers, that helps pay for trucks, that helps doing everything. So you think, I think it's 50 million right now. Say Borjomi is about 100,000 hectares. So you figure if you do this work, you could possibly get $5 million or $10 million over 10 years for Borjomi. That's an example. And it basically it's it's called tons of carbon saved that you're saving. So the process is quite complicated. These are all the steps that you need. You have to create a project proposal, get the government approvals, hire a developer, and figure out. Then you have to sell the carbon. You hope the price is high, otherwise you don't get the money. And these are the areas that you can invest the money in. You can put it into protection, monitoring, law enforcement, community ecotourism development, agriculture, health. All these community things are very important to get the buy-in and approval from the communities around the park or the protected area. But this is a beautiful landscape. We love working in Cambodia. And these are the types of things that the RED project provided. They built 43 freshwater wells from that money. So that's the type of thing, and hopefully helping a lot of people. That's my thing. It's very complicated, costs you a lot of money up front, but if you can get, in this case, they have $40 million, $50 million, very, very successful. Let me introduce Firth Griffith. Firth actually serves on the board of Global Conservation, so you have someone that knows GC since the beginning. He's done worked both in China for many years, speaks fluent Chinese, Japanese, so he knows Asia very well. and introduce Firth Griffith.
Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me. Tell me how to do this.
That one, this one.
Yeah, okay.
They'll put your thing.
So, finance is a very exciting field, but green finance is actually more exciting. Does anyone know why green finance is more exciting? Not enough dollars. And I'm going to explain why. So green finance, like Jeff explained, that example is 25 years old. It's stuck in what we call shareholder capitalism, where nature doesn't have a seat. So our job is to move nature into a formal seat at the table in what we call stakeholder capitalism.
You want to use that?
So I hope I can keep your attention about this and talk a little bit about what I've learned. So in business school, my finance professor liked to say, finance is just people moving money instruments around until there's no more money. In college, my professor liked to say, scientists observe what policymakers forget. In that context, I'd like to talk today about just two things. What are the financial instruments available for reducing forest emissions? How can we attract more capital investors to increase their commitments? So, in very simple terms, what we do is we try to find ways to ensure more investors put more money into projects you care about. In fact, we provide a three-tiered service of scientific, nature, and market-based solutions to attract more investors to green finance instruments, including environmental, social, and governance goals, or ESG. In short, we provide, number one, a scientific-based biosphere, measurable, recordable, and verifiable methodology. Number two, a full range of impacts on the natural ecosystem to ensure accountability of the financial instruments. And three, corrections to today's common statistical approaches by internalizing biodiversity implications. That's the correction on REDD+ that's needed in order for that to expand. And also, it's a source, we ensure the scientific verification of the sources of carbon credits in voluntary schemes like REDD to reduce what's called greenwashing. So forests face challenges, everyone knows. Climate and biodiversity face challenges. Our livelihoods are at stake. Forests need an additional $300 to $400 billion annually in financing just to meet sustainability goals. Last year, global deforestation reached 6.6 million hectares, with primary tropical forest loss at 4.1 million hectares. Only $2.2 billion in public funds is channeled to forests each year, a mere fraction compared to other global investments. Internationally, at least 100 times more public funding goes to environmentally harmful subsidies than to making forests sustainable. To increase capital commitments, green finance stakeholders demand economic incentives, transparency, and accountability. Pricing carbon and pricing financial instruments requires problem solving like, number one, bridging the gap between scientific community with policymaking and market decision makers. Number two, enabling investigators visibilities into their research outputs with policy impacts. And number three, creating concrete benchmarks like key performance indicators, KPIs, alignment and accountability to ensure the realization of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals and ESG, as well as market-based solutions that respect the market principle. Everyone knows the market principle. What makes an investment attractive to institutional investors and companies to support nature means they have an aligned risk reward for any project, and that investors' goals and targeted nature outcomes are fully verifiable. Okay, so now we're going to go into some of the varieties of green finance instruments. But before that, I should give a little more background on the applications that we have for, and the outputs from our actual work, our foundational work to move green financing into stakeholder capitalism. One of the things we did was create the first national level species specialist group for IUCN Species Survival Commission to pilot its strategic measure supporting UN's Sustainable Development Goals, Nature-Based Strategy and Action Plan, and the Global Biodiversity Framework. Essentially what we did was we took SSC from IUCN and put it inside the country to work with policy implementation and enforcement directly without the cover of the multilateral agencies. And now that's in China, and now several other countries are copying that concept and putting SSC inside their countries. Number two, we're working with major stock exchanges around the world to create a nature-based and market-based valuation metric for public companies and projects. Right now, valuations, for instance, in the US are based on discounted cash flows of future earnings or revenues, and that's obviously not accommodating nature in any way. Number three, we're creating market-based solutions and nature-based solutions to ensure the viability of ESG. Our China Species Specialist Group is spearheading the establishment of a multi-stakeholder global ESG hub for SSC. Oh, no, I must have missed one. No? Okay, anyhow, in 2019, there were more than 1,000 organizations managing over $500 billion in impact investing assets worldwide. Fortunately, 1/4 of professionally managed assets, that's about 13 trillion US dollars, now consider sustainability principles when making investments. So each flavor of green finance offers some incentives, transparency, and accountability, and now we can go into the details. So I'll start with biodiversity credits. This is relatively new public funding instrument or grant for finance activities that deliver net positive biodiversity gains. Unlike carbon or biodiversity offsets, biodiversity credits allow companies to support nature positive action. An example of Protect and Restore is Switzerland's UBP's Biodiversity Restoration Fund. Funding long-term conservation and restoration of nature is a greater contribution to biodiversity and climate action than simply offsetting negative impacts. I think, well, I guess I'll talk a little bit about RED, even though you've covered it. So RED presents a cost-effective means to achieving climate goals. It allows forest custodians to sell carbon credits to participating carbon markets. According to the Center for International Forestry Research, in 2018, there were about 500 RED plus forest carbon emissions reduction initiatives in about 60 countries. And IPCC estimates deforestation and forest degradation contribute more greenhouse gas emissions than the transport sector globally. Of course, we've already talked about the fact that some projects have been criticized for a lack of verifiable sources of carbon credits. voluntary markets need more clarity and oversight to ensure a fair distribution of monies. Offsets, of course, that don't represent reductions in deforestation and emissions threaten the flow of funding for forest conservation everywhere. On debt, of course, there's secured and unsecured loans. One has pledge assets, the other one does not. And one presenter already mentioned that there's a unique example, debt for climate swaps, where a nation's debt is forgiven in exchange for investment in climate change adaptation and mitigation, thereby addressing both crises at once. The next is philanthropy, giving. Grants from foundations like Moore, MacArthur, Packard, etc. Philanthropic giving together with public funding formed the basis for the US conservation efforts in the 19th century. Out of $730 billion in total philanthropic giving worldwide in 2019, roughly 5 to 9 billion was dedicated to climate change mitigation, much of it from just a few individuals and their foundations in the US. The next is blended finance. This includes private and public participants in environmental climate risk mitigation, like GEF, Global Environment Facility, who also provides private financing to the World Bank Wildlife Conservation Bond. Today, GEF's looking at funding about $1.5 billion for forests, including all projects impacting the sector. Since '92, GEF funded around 500 forest-related projects, investing around $3.4 billion and leveraging an additional expected amount of $17 billion to promote sustainable forest management in developing countries around the world. I'm going to focus mostly on the next topic, and that topic is bonds, or debentures. Debentures are unsecured loan instruments. Hence, the investor's only guarantee for repayment is the dependability of the issuing institution. One of the advantages of the bond market is that the depth and diversity of investors means that there is usually demand for a wide range of maturities and issue sizes, typically issued by a corporation or a government. Much depends on strong governance and management strength, support by the rating community, and rigorous review process for land acquisition. So I'm going to skip, since Jeff talked already about Cambodia, and of course there's also a Peru project that's in application for REDD+. I'm going to focus on the sustainability-linked bond and one carbon index bond. So Chile created last year the first sovereign sustainability-linked bond. Our colleague and founder of ZN Group in London, Professor Michael Manelli, pioneered the policy performance bonds for COP13. He actually based it on the American Revolutionary War's inflation index bonds to compensate soldiers when there was inflation during the war. Number one, a policy performance bond provides a hedge against the issuing country's government or a corporate organization not delivering on its commitments or targets. Policy performance bonds can be issued against carbon emission reduction targets, as well as forest preservation targets and any other area where policy risk is significant. Green policy performance bonds or sustainability-linked bonds are a subset of green bonds. However, they differ from green bonds, social bonds, or sustainability bonds in several crucial ways. Number one, the funds raised are not tied to a specific project, but a corporate or national objective, as in the achievement of sustainability or other targets. Number two, SLBs are issued with specific sustainability performance targets, which contain key performance indicators. If the SPT is missed, the bond is subject to a step-up clause, meaning the bond interest increases. The major advantage is that they are tied to outcomes rather than application. This means that an organization or country can use a wide range of means to achieve its outcome. So let's look at Chile first. So it was a $2 billion offering over 20 years, and they received 4 times the demand for the $2 billion. This is an achievement, of course, given the sovereign bond market's volatility and uncertainty. Because the sovereign SLB is not tied to a specific project, Chile is free to use any means it can to achieve them, including its forests. The next one is Uruguay, also a very interesting situation. They had a $4 billion demand for only $1.5 billion in bonds last October. And once they issued it, the Japanese rating agency raised their credit rating of the country. And they said something interesting when they did that. They had a press announcement. And they said the rating agency cited the country's strategic commitment to decarbonizing its economy as one of the factors that influenced its increased rating. And the last slide is on this subject is the Brazil index-linked carbon bond, which is very interesting because they lost, I think, 8% of their forest from 1990 to 2005, a 15-year period. And their target was to go back to that 1990 level within 16 years. And if they don't meet that target, they have to pay 16% per annum to the investors. So it's a big story. So in summary, there are things that we need new foundational tools to address in order to increase the viability of 1 through 5. And yet the next 1 through 5 seems to be working well because stakeholders seem to be happy. And I guess the only final statement might be that in the future, we should look for biodiversity credits, EU mandatory credits, blended finance options, index green bonds, and even cryptocurrency conservation instruments, because things will change as we create better tools for investors to reach their accountability and transparency goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Firth, for a very nice presentation. Okay. So actually, as Mr. Jaff announced, so we will skip Mr. James and Mr. Mike's presentations, and tomorrow we will start the day with this one. So now I would like to say that we can continue with the country presentations, and it will be very, very quick ones because we still wanted to not to be only focused on the presentations of the speakers. We also would like to present some national parks of our world. Actually today we will focus on Russia, Ukraine, also for Carpathians, and also we'll present Macedonia National Park of Shar, and these representations also tomorrow you will have the possibility to see briefly at the second hall, which we will have it. So basically about Russia, can we have PowerPoint? Okay. Should I use this? Okay. So about Russia National Park, I will shortly show you it on the map. It's over here, and you know, once we were talking about protected areas, my colleagues already mentioned that it's 13% of our country. I will not focus on this too much, but I will talk more on Russia. We selected Russia to present you apart from other national parks because it's a new one. It's just was established this year, and we need definitely a lot of capacities in order to increase and to enhance. Also, in terms of technical assistance, in terms of human resources, we definitely have lots of necessities where we started taking measures in these directions. We already have mobilized the funding from different organizations like Global Conservation and Caucasus Nature Fund, as well as from German government, we also have significant support for this, and the couple of years ahead will be mostly directed for Racha development. So I will talk later on what we mean under this. So here you see the protected areas, which is already established and which is more than 50,000 hectares right now. So why it was established? So of course biodiversity of Racha, whoever you have been there, it's really wonderful, and we have a lot of high ecological value flora and fauna species. How we gonna manage these protected areas? Of course, still we will use the management plan, which will be elaborated in the upcoming months with the support of our partners, and there will be all the legislative documents ready in order to move ahead with proper administration and functioning of this park. At this stage, the structure of the park looks like this. So there is a couple of people working in the system. Still, I would like to highlight that it's quite challenging to hire and recruit staff at Racha region, because you know, in high mountain regions, the staff, it's not so easy to retrain the to recruit the qualified staff. That's why it became quite challenging to recruit them. So what we are going to do in this park, and because it needs initial investments and we need to start everything from scratch, there is no hiking trails according to high standards. There is no administrative building. There is no shelters for tourists and so on and so on. So we start everything from scratch. We definitely underline the involvement of local communities, and we definitely will be happy to work with their involvement in terms of developing all the plans that we have. Basically, at this stage, we are going to build the administration office where the staff working there will be accommodated. We are going to open the visitor center, which will be an illustration of the park and will give all the information to the tourists, whoever comes there, about the biodiversity and about the species of this park. The hiking trail network will be made in this park so that all the visitors will have a very practical and modern standards hiking trail possibilities over there. I will not talk about some other projects because of course there will be a lot of smaller initiatives. So why we would like to draw your attention, what is our intervention and why we limit our intervention with just hiking trails over there, is that our approach is that to make minimum infrastructure, minimum services within the protected areas, and just to create these points, these spots of attraction over there. So creating the hiking trails and proposing people to come to National Park of Racha, then it is a great possibility for local communities to see the potential which exists through the increased visitation and to embark on businesses which will be absolutely in line with environment and which will be eco-friendly. So we propose them a lot of possibilities. You see that they will get a lot of possibilities for employment, which is so important for Racha people, and they will have a lot of opportunities also to start ecotourism activities and produce relating products, handicrafts, and also economic projects, which will be afterwards followed with the grant projects about some small grants for starting businesses, some small grants for trainings and increasing their qualifications, so on. So this is what I have already mentioned, that we will start with administrative buildings and some basic infrastructure that will give us possibility to work closely with our communities. You also see some wonders of the beauty of Racha, and I guarantee that this is not a maximum that you will see there, and Racha has even more to explore. And we definitely have in mind that expansion of Racha National Park, as well as adding other protected areas in the surrounding, this will be one of our next steps, as this territory really gives us this possibility. About land projects, I basically spoke about it, but still would like to highlight that minimum infrastructure, which will just give opportunity to locals to spend their time in harmony with nature, will be created in the upcoming years. So this is just the photo just to admire, and yeah, I was too short. And I also would like to ask Mr. Mustafa Gonen also to add, because he has been recently in Russia, and he has something to share with us as well.
Thank you. Welcome. I know it's quite late, but shall we see the video first or what? Okay. Let's see the video first, and I will. Yes, please. We, together with Andrea Pistolesi, who is our photographer, who did a great job in Russia, and prepared this short video for you to introduce Russia National Park, which is a young park, as Tamar said. Can you see it?
თუ საქართველო სოფლიოს მოსწონს თავისი სილამაზით, თავისი ბუნებრივი აგებულებით, მათ შორის რაჭა არის ერთ-ერთი ულამაზესი კუთხე საქართველოსი, სადაც ცხოვრობს უპატიოსნესი მშრომელი ხალხი. ჩვენი სოფელი მე-12 საუკუნემდე არსებობდა. ჩვენ სოფელში ჩვენი დიდებული თამარ მეფე არის ნამყოფი და გადავლილი მამისონის პერევანზე.
Russia National Park on the southern side of the Caucasus mountain range in Georgia is one of the critical situations in which global conservation is going to help in protecting the natural environment. Its proximity with Russia makes the area particularly sensible to external influences, but its remoteness has helped preserve pristine forests and wildlife. Like in Borjomi Karagali National Park, Global Conservation signed a multi-year agreement with Georgian Agency for Protected Areas to deploy global park defense in order to be able to support Russia National Park this time. The goal is to achieve no-cut, no-kill protection by monitoring all the roads and trails used by illegal loggers, hunters, and wildlife poachers. Basically, Russia National Park is a valley surrounded by very high mountains. On the other side of this mountain, there is Russia, and on this side, there is South Ossetia. In year 2008, there was a war between Russia and Georgia where the inhabitants of this area were displaced.
სტუმართ მოყვარე ადამიანები. სტუმარი გვიყვარს და დღეს მე ბედნიერი ვარ ამ ასაკის პერიოდში, რომ ჩემ კუთხეში იტალიელს, გერმანელს, აფრიკელს, ყველა კუთხის ადამიანს ვხვდები. ეს რამ განაპირობა? აი, რკინის წყარები რო იყო საბჭოთა კავშირით, იმის დამგრევამ განაპირობა, რომ დღეს ყველა ერის წარმომადგენელს ვხვდებით ამ შორეულ კუთხეში. ესაა ჩვენთვის დიდი ბედნიერება.
From the rivers and streams capable of producing catastrophic landslides like in 2023, when dozens of people died or are still missing, to a dense pine tree and beech forest, a coveted prey for indiscriminative logging, the park is in need of continuous surveillance. Park rangers patrol a wide and remote area where the local population is still used to allow farm animals to graze and cut food for home eating, while poaching is still widespread. Global park defense is a methodology created by global conservation to protect wildlife against illegal activities. So far in Georgia, it has been implemented in Borjomi Karagali National Park, and the next step is Russia National Park. Georgia is a country with a rich biodiversity, and we are here to help them protect it. And the threats are illegal logging, hunting and overgrazing, and in the case of Russia, we are also very close to the Russian border. Industrial logging is a widespread activity in the region, officially sanctioned, but to keep it under real control requires an effort and a difficult change of culture, a process in which global conservation stands, helping the few rangers devoted to the forest protection. This is a typical example of local agricultural activities in the region. But with the help of this project, there will be new job opportunities for the people in wildlife protection and ecotourism. And to keep the risk of over-tourism is another challenge, like in bordering Svaneti region, a natural and historical haven destined to become a national park, but already crowded all year round. Please join global conservation to help save our endangered forests, intact ecosystems, and wildlife habitats in developing regions. Show your support and get involved by visiting our website today. I don't know whether you visited our website today to support us. Anyway. What I can talk a whole lot, but I won't. But what I have to underline for Russia National Park is that, you know, especially the existing protected areas, including the national parks, they're usually paper parks, and then they really need support, and we need capacity building to empower them. But at the same time, our mission is not only to work in the existing protected areas, but we are also giving so much importance to support the young parks. As Tamar said, it has been proclaimed early this year, and then the very first time I visited the park, it was only the park director and his deputy and the borders, and there was nothing else. But now, after some months, we have a place to work, and then we have a vehicle, and then we have some rangers. So especially I can say that together with, of course, Caucasus Nature Fund and Agency of Protected Areas of Georgia and Global Conservation, we're trying to establish the right foundations in order not to let this park be a paper park. Andrea, would you like to add something about it?
Just I note this is still a draft of the video. When we do a video with global conservation, first of all, we keep in mind with the public, which is a general public, it's not a specialized public like in here. And we have two main points to show. One is the beauty of the environment that we risk to lose, and all the richness and culture, etc. The other one are the threats to this beauty that we need to protect. The second part is very difficult because, of course, poachers or loggers don't like to be filmed or anything like that. And the same goes for wildlife that, as we have seen, we are taking advantage of trap cameras, etc. I have to say that we need a lot of support from the local authorities, rangers, etc., to get access to show what the threats are. It's not always the case. Sometimes it's difficult to access and show what the threats are. So that's a very important part that we need to solve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa. Thank you, Mr. Andres, for a very nice video. Definitely very inspiring just to contribute to nature conservation. So now I would like to ask to our friends from Ukraine, Ms. Olena Slobodian, and also Mr. Oleksandr Kuseliuk, to present Carpathians National Park.
So, dear participant of the summit, I'm really happy to be here to see my colleague from Ukraine. Actually, it's a big event for me. And I would like to introduce you Oleksandr Kuseliuk. He's Deputy Director of Carpathian National Nature Park, and he would say you some words. Greetings.
Шановні колеги, перш за все, вибачення за те, що я не вмію грузинською, англійською, але я вмію українською.
So he is apologizing because he doesn't speak Georgian or English. So next time he will.
Але мені хотілося дуже подякувати організаторам цієї саміту про те, що у нас такий нелегкий час в державі. Не забули про таку державу, як Україна. Я вам від найстарішого, першого національного парку хочу щиро подякувати.
So he is really grateful for organizers for invitation and to participate in this summit. It's not really easy time for Ukraine. It's really hard to get here. It was get here, but he's really happy to participate and to actually to know more about participant and що ви ще сказали? Okay, he is also would like to say that he is representing now the oldest and one of the first park established in Ukraine. So he is really grateful to be here.
І ще хочеться сказати, що дуже цінно, що все ж таки оцінюють роль українських національних парків і організований такий перший саміт природоохоронних територій. Це є важлива подія на планеті Земля. І вироблення тих концепцій, тих всіх напрацювань, які вони є, дадуть змогу нам разом зберегти нашу природу.
It is very important event for actually for Georgia and also for Ukraine to be invited here, and probably during this summit we can also solve many issues related to the global challenges on the earth.
І ще одна ремарка. Ми працюємо з багатьма фондами. І я би хотів сьогодні, так як один з співорганізаторів цього саміту є Global Conservation, подякувати цій організації, тому що відколи ми почали з ними працювати, ми так само з ними плідно працюємо, ми не бачимо, ми вирішуємо питання буквально в режимі оперативному, і будь-які питання ми знімаємо.
We are working with different actually NGO and many funds supporting Carpathian National Nature Park, but actually when we started working with global conservation, it was really, we started working really fast. So it was really surprising for Oleksandr. In a couple of months, we started really working in the field and implement all the activities discussed before. So he really impressed by the work of global conservation and grateful to work and continue cooperation.
І для того, щоб ми розуміємо, що вже пізня година, ми організуємося так, що Олена зараз вам англійською мовою, щоб не було перекладу, зробить презентацію тих справ, які ми робимо на території нашого парку.
So he understands that it is late evening and he doesn't want to take your time. So I will I will do the presentation because it will take time to translate for translation. So just thank you for attention. So, dear colleague, I will take you from the newly established protected area from Racha. I will take you to the Carpathians, one of the oldest national park in Ukraine. And first, I would like to tell you that where is located Ukraine, eastern part of Europe. And actually, Carpathians are most unique actually ecosystem in Europe. It's actually form 930 miles long, goes through 7 countries in Europe. And Carpathian National Nature Park located in the western part of Ukraine. And the area of the park is more than 50,000 hectares. It's also represent highly biodiversity. We have near 50 rare plant communities, more than 150 rare plants and animals included to the international red list and also red list of Ukraine. And on this picture you can see some beauty of the Carpathian National Nature Park. So here we have big mammals like deers, wolves, bears, and wild boar, and other species are really unique. But we only talking about biodiversity, but we forgot to tell about actually other features like primeval forest, intact forest. It's still present in Ukrainian Carpathians, and because in the past the access to the forest was really impossible. We didn't have roads. That's why we still actually preserve this unique ecosystem. We're talking about biodiversity, but I also would like to mention about special and unique culture they call Hutsul. They're famous about handcrafting, about food, embroidered clothes like this kind of shirt, and also another like songs. So many tourists really attracted to this culture and come into the national park to learn more about Hutsul population and also about their traditions, food, and enjoying to be here in the park. So, but we can we play this video? So we are talking about beauty of the Carpathians, but we forgot about all the challenges still going on in the Carpathian region. It's a pollution, it's a illegal hunting, it's a also illegal cutting, and also that's why actually global conservation, in this picture you can see what is happening in Carpathian stills, not in the park, but yeah, in the other parts of Carpathians. That's why actually global conservation decided to work in Ukraine, because we still have many unique ecosystem. And in 2019, global conservation connected to the Carpathian National Nature Park, and we started actually working really fast. After a couple months, we established a command center in the park. Also, it was purchased many of the camera traps and GPS and other equipment for the command center. And on these graphs, you can see the number of the cameras were purchased and working in the Carpathian National Nature Park. And also what is important to purchase the smartphones for the rangers. They were using that for patrolling and for implementing global park defense program. It was actually the first pilot park in Ukraine who using smart patrolling as a system. Can you replay also this video? So on this video you can actually see how the rangers patrolling the area, and it was also the first truck. Can you imagine 21st century, and only the first truck was purchased for the Carpathian National Nature Park, and it's the oldest park in Ukraine. Another thing was important, and what we did in the frame of this project, we installed the camera trap in the critical spot. And we made many trainings, smart training for the rangers. So rangers well know about the system, how to use smartphones, so they can track their and record their routes, and also record illegal activities in the area. All this information going every month to the management office and actually to the headquarters, so they can make in the end of the month some decision how to improve the system, where to point another patrolling. So in this diagram you can see some result of smart patrolling. So to the end of 2023, rangers were patrolling by foot near 33,000 kilometers, and by car near 13,000 kilometers. A number of illegal activities a little bit increased in the end of the 2023, and I will explain actually later why. So what was important also, global conservation supported to in restoration of the ranger station. So on the left pictures you can see in which condition rangers were working. It's really hot, and all the ranger stations were located in the remote areas where they really need heating even in the summertime, because the temperature dropped down like really increasingly. So 3 ranger stations were repaired by global conservation, and on next pictures you can see where. So this next scenes, Global Conservation supported to produce movie Queen of Carpathians. It's a imagined story about young woman who decided to support nature protection and fight against illegal logging, poaching, and actually to save the nature in Carpathians. So she decided to work with local NGO, with protected areas, with international NGO, just to find new approaches how to improve the protection. So this movie tells about like all the scenes and about beauty. This movie can watch also in the hall of the hotel, or we can probably have possibility to watch it like in the next days of the summit. Another beautiful thing, Global Conservation helped to publish this book. It's an underground wallet of Carpathians. You can look later if you have a chance. So it's a book about the most smallest organism, which is occur in the forest ecosystem, and the importance of them, because as usual, many organizations focus mostly on the big mammals or big animals, but we all totally forgot about the one who are really important to save and keep the balance in the forest ecosystem. Okay, and now actually we started working to distribute this book. This book was also published by supported by Global Conservation, Frankfurt Zoological Society, and Raffler Foundation. So now we're spreading this book to the schools of Ukraine and also libraries. Another important thing was done by Global Conservation. It's mink population study. Why it's really important. On this map you can see the distribution in the last century of European mink, but what happened nowadays, only it exists in a couple countries, but we still don't have so much information about the population size of European mink. It's critically endangered and actually extinct in most countries of Europe. That's why it was important to study population size of the species in Carpathian National Nature Park. So actually found out that we have 40 individuals in the park. In this picture you can see we install also camera trap in the critical spots. Also people were tracking the traces of the presence of the European mink in the park. So, and we're happy actually that we have it. And in future we plan to finish and prepare the proposal and conservation action plan for future protection of European mink also in the adjacent area to the park. So now I would like also to mention, my colleague will tell more tomorrow about how full invasion actually affect Ukraine, but it's also affect Carpathian National Nature Park. By the German government, by the support of German government, some of the tracks were purchased for the Carpathian protected areas, but during the full-scale invasion, many of trucks were taken to the war, and also what is also really hard, many of the rangers also were taken to the war. So that's why probably some number of the illegal activities increase, and it's actually hard to do patrolling and do work in the park. And what I'm really grateful is that even during these hard times for Ukraine, Global Conservation really support even not only big things like restoration of the ranger station, but also support even saving the little animals, like because we have in the park enclosure for the animals. So the budget was cut during the full-scale invasions. Global Conservation also helps us to actually to support with the food, purchase the food for the animals. It also was important. And I'm really grateful for cooperation with Global Conservation and future support. We have so many plans. And thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Olena. Definitely, we all hope that, and we do believe that the war will be finished soon and Carpathians National Park will continue functioning as before. Okay, and for today, now the last presentation already for Macedonia, Sharp Mountains. I'm pretty sure that we will enjoy this presentation and finalize our day with these nice clips and video. Ms. Anela Stavrevska-Panajotova, Head of Nature Conservation Department from the Institution on National Parks, please.
Thank you. It's an honor, and I hope I will manage to keep your attention. I knew that I would be the last, so I planned that my presentation speaks more than my words. So it has a lot of photographs, and you will be able to see video material later in the hall and tomorrow. Just before starting my presentation, just to explain why Macedonia and all Balkan was very excited about this national park, because it's the missing link in the biodiversity conservation in the Balkan. We are talking about more than, I would say, 250,000. Toby, we do have it in the Balkan. It's reality. And our national park was just this missing piece in the puzzle. Where do I change? Here. So I will speak briefly about how everything started, then the values and some characteristics of the area, some basic threats. We have them a lot, and I will not stick to the challenges, but rather to the progress. Here we are. That's Macedonia, where the red dot is. We're just above Greece. We're a neighboring country with Greece, Serbia, Kosovo, Albania, and Bulgaria. And our territory of protected areas has just reached 13%. And our national park is on the north border area with Kosovo, the green line. I'll show you. We are talking about this area. And this is Mavrovo National Park, and here we have the protected areas in Albania. Just some visual things to bring our beauties close to you. We have more than 40 glacier lakes and really characteristic landscapes, breathtaking places. A lot of water. It's on the north part of the country where we had the humid air from the north, cold air, colliding with the Mediterranean climate. So we have a lot of rivers and water sources, which makes the area also very risky for the people living at the foothill of the mountain. And we do have a densely populated area down. A lot of biodiversity. These are just some of the photos and some more of these breathtaking landscapes. Why we were really excited about this area? It took the country more than 20 years to proclaim this area of a national park. It was a really long process, a very challenging process where we had to go a few times back and forward, from the public to the institutions, then political pressures, then cross-border issues, then lack of finances, and suddenly we had the momentum of, yeah, now it's finally the time. If this third effort doesn't go, then we'll lose it. So in 2001, after a valorization study that has been going for years and more than 43 experts working hard on validating and confirming this to the public and trying to convince everyone, yes, this should be a national park. We brought the process to, I would say, proposed zonation to the public, which was not accepted. Then we went back, then redid the zonation, and finally, we had the national park proclaimed. And on June 30, 2001, we had this missing piece of the puzzle on the map. almost 33,000 hectares with second category IUCN National Park. 75% of it has a high level of protection, so strict zone and the active management zone. And we have a quite ambitious management plan, which is approved, and that's also a huge success because it was a process of battle. First, I would say, with the institutions and also negotiating this with the 7 municipalities and more than 17,000 people living in the park and depending on these resources. So 27 villages, out of which 25 are living villages, so people really depend on these natural resources, and we had to find this balance. How do we convince people that it's really worth it to live in a national park? And the vision of this national park is that we become one of the most visited areas, desirable tourist destinations in Europe by 32. Of course, to reach that goal, we need to fight so many threats. I've selected only the basic ones. I can continue with slides till the end of the presentation, but these are just some of them. So as mentioned, there is a lot of people living there, and you can imagine the pressure of all human activities, starting from waste, then to need for a heating resource, then some construction activities. There is also a ski center in the park, which was not developed for many years, and 2 companies that do freeride skiing, which is a very modern sport activity in the snow season, in winter. They do freeride skiing, and this is very rare, actually, in Europe. And maybe if some of you have it in your countries, I would be happy to hear and exchange some experiences how to deal with this challenge, because for me it's also new. So these are just few, and in the middle there, you see pipes covered with snow. We still are fighting the battle of building small hydropower plants in the national parks in Macedonia, unfortunately. It's a huge battle. Our neighboring park, Mavrovo, had this battle many years ago, and they're still fighting the battle. And I'm happy to share with you that we haven't given any positive opinion for building any new small hydropower plants in our national park, and this is how it's going to be. I'm a forestry engineer. It's not like it's written in the paper. In the last couple of years in my work, I'm more like a biologist, but actually it turns out that the forestry engineers, in the core of their business, they do have a lot of nature protection, and that's the grandmother willow from the movie Pocahontas. Sometimes the right path is not the easiest one, and this is how we started. Few people with a vision, with a dream, and a bit of bravery got along, and by believing in this goal we have in front of us, started this story. And in the last 2 years, it has been a really dynamic process. And I tried really to condense a lot in a short presentation, which I will go through photographs. First, of course, yeah, it's easy to proclaim a national park, but again, it's a paper park. We had to find a way how to make it alive. Our country, unfortunately, hasn't proclaimed a national park for 60 years. So even the institutional memory is gone, how to start the process. So we were, by ourselves, fighting the way how to administratively solve out everything that was on our plate. And without money, it's really a nightmare, believe me. We had a basic fund from but again, with these brave friends, with vision and initial support from our government. We had the first support coming from the Press Pauchrit Nature Trust Fund and Miriam de Koning, the executive director, is here, and I'm thankful in front of everyone. Without your support, it wouldn't be possible. And then it just required continuous growth. Our mental growth in the team, in the contacts, in our knowledge, in sharing experience with the neighboring parks, first of all, then going cross-border, and they're just learning what you can do better, not to repeat the same things. That dear is part of the team, by the way. Then our team was growing, and then we suddenly had an extra support. I was so excited, and I changed my status on LinkedIn, and I said, I work for the national park. Then after a few days, a message came from a new person, some Jeff Morgan. I work for the global conservation. I would like to help a new national park. So, this is a joke. This doesn't happen. So I closed the computer. But dude, miracles do happen. And I'm really thankful that you exist and global conservation exists, and also your board. Thank you. But again, everything is happening online, so you can imagine my suspicion. Is this real? Then he says, okay, we have a colleague, some guy, Mustafa, coming from Turkey. He's from the Balkan, so you'll sort it out. Just tell us what you need. So we started filling the gaps from unknown field of what you need to deliver, problems you need to solve, or challenges that you need to approach. And the whole strategy, finally, we started filling the gaps together with Mustafa. And that picture, and Andrea, thank you for the nice video as well. You can see it also in the lobby. That picture with the boots, it's the picture where we almost lost our Minister for Nature Conservation, Minister for Nature Conservation, because he dropped in the river, literally, but he doesn't bring the money. I'm joking. The institutional support is very important, and it also helped us to build the image. The image, it's a very important thing when you start something from scratch. I heard you here in this country, you are dealing with a lot of new national parks, but for us everything was new, and it was tremendously important to find the right logo, to find the right balance between representing the people, the cultural heritage, and the natural beauties, and then how to persuade them to continue in supporting the national park and be on the side of nature conservation and not on the side of somebody that is harming the nature. So the logo was developed, the website was developed, this video that Global Conservation supported us to prepare, then the management plan was approved, and all other planning documents. Like, I just won't go in there. It's too much. And to cut the long story short, it's easier when you start with simple things. And then we got support from Pond pushing us to identify 5 key species and 5 key habitats that will lead us and guide us in a more simple way of nature conservation out of this vast field of problems. And a lot of serious discussions were happening on the very strange places. And this slide is just for Jeff to be jealous that he still hasn't visited Macedonia. And I hope in spring you will. We do have management programs. I mentioned the management plan is very ambitious. It has 8 management programs and over 160 activities, which is tremendous field of work, from dealing with biodiversity, nature conservation, and dealing with people. And sometimes we tend to say that we are actually managing the people, not the nature. But it's always both. We try to simplify all of this in 3 main pillars. One is protection. The second is education. We need to do a lot of work with people and raising awareness and explaining simply what is allowed, what is forbidden, and why, the reasoning why something is forbidden. And then the next pillar is the development, the pillar that should bring them eventually on board. Then our first goal, mentioned a few times, it's very difficult to select where to start when you're starting from scratch. Our first goal was to calm the nature. This mountain is under pressure from so many activities, so many personal interests, business interests, even national interests. So a lot of people tend to harm it. So the first goal was to calm it down. And we developed this way of restricted movement in which we started positioning these info boards, signs, explaining forbidden and allowed activities. Some vehicles got at the police. I don't know where this pointer is. And this picture down. These are cross motorbikes that crossed the border from Kosovo and were trapped by a joint action with the police enforcement, and they never returned back to Kosovo. We use a lot of intelligence from social media because people tend to be proud on social media, and we are using everything that's available there. Then the waste management. It was important to build the trust between the local people and the institutions that still there is an institution that cares, because the trust is lost. Once the trust is lost, everything is lost. So we had to bring back this trust. And we found alliances among the mountaineering, hiking clubs. A lot of people were involved in cleaning actions, waste management, collection of this waste that was thrown everywhere. And as you can see on this picture, and you will see him on many pictures, this is our park director. And I really thank him for his personal dedication. He's engaged in every action. And when you have the key person of the institution on the field, people are ashamed. And this is one important element. Then building partnerships, a lot of meetings with the border police, with the regular police, with the justice, with the court, and the prosecutors to explain them about these new nature conservation laws and regulations. Because once we got the people that are doing illegal activities, they have to be prosecuted. If these people on the meetings don't understand what we are doing, then they will never be prosecuted. So we had, in this year, we had few successful cases of dealing with illegal loggers, with motorized vehicles moving everywhere, and with poachers even. A lot of informative meetings, a lot of talking, a lot of Saturdays and Sunday nights on the field, because these are the times when people are not at work. And usually this is how meeting starts. People are at distance, and this is how it ends. The circle closes. Some more meetings, and this is an event where our ranger service was not allowed to put informative board in one of the villages because the people from the village didn't have enough explanation, so they didn't allow them. And this is an indicator for us that we didn't do our talking enough. There is never enough of communication. A lot of illegal activities. Fortunately, this bear is not dead. It was saved. This was a bear trapped in a, how do you call this? I don't know. Sorry? Yeah. And it was released, but another bear was killed in a car accident. And this is something related to these green corridors. We don't have them, and under our national park there is a huge and frequent road that is very often used, and people do drive fast. So in Shar Mountain National Park there is no hunting. This is a new rule after the area is proclaimed as a national park. There are people prosecuted and over 10 meetings with the local hunters explaining why things should change. Illegal cutting, another topic very popular at this part of the year. No cutting for commercial cut. This is the decision of the management of the park. The park is not going to be financed by commercial cuts, only for it will supply only heating wood for the people living in the park. There has been successful prosecutions for illegal cuts and over 50 cubic meters just in 1 year, which is a success for us because we didn't have the right means, and we're just in the procedure of buying mean supported by global conservation to confiscate illegal cut wood. I deliberately put these two photographs there so you can see the road conditions, and very often our 4x4 vehicles got flipped and it's very dangerous. So we don't have machinery to improve the road condition even for our ranger service. And this is another topic. It's becoming more popular. Unfortunately, this picture here is a picture where how we celebrated our Orthodox Christmas in January. Yeah, when it's really not common to have forest fires. You have snow in the mountains, and then you still have very high in the mountain forest fire. And yes, I also more often go in the field than I wear high heels. Reforestation, afforestation, and seeding is another topic we are just starting, but it takes time. The condition of our forests is very interesting because, as I said, when you neglect an area for 20 years, a lot has been going on. Unregistered previous forest fires or illegal cut wood of a beech forest cut up to here, then it doesn't grow. So you need to do intervention measures to reforestate these areas. And last year at this, I think it was November, end of November, we just started first measures, and we are going to continue this. And for next year, because there is a lot of natural growth, as you can see here, we don't need to plant. We just need to deploy eco guards, and this is something I plan to talk later or tomorrow. Illegal building is another topic. I won't continue too long after this. We have identified with pond support 769 illegal building objects, and we are trying to investigate with the municipalities what of these are legalized or not legalized, so we will continue this work. A lot of support came from both donors to supply the institution with all the necessary means, like the office and clothing and GPS, trap cameras, motorized vehicles, these info boards. That's my new office, by the way, because I didn't have an office for 1 year, and I'm really happy and excited. So, just before ending, I want to share one important thing. The national parks in Macedonia are self-financed institutions. Unfortunately, our country is not strong enough to support financially the national parks. Our national park had only the case of being supported for 3 years of a very limited amount. And this is a big handicap, I must say. And it's it could be brave, but it could be also a dumb step in just pushing the country of proclaiming more and more protected areas if the country has not dedicated financial support to that. That's why it's very important that donor support is available, at least for the beginning. In our case, this is the percentages, which are very important, and 46% of our funding is covered by POND. And until we build our own funds, in creating revenue from services that the park is giving, we depend on global conservation and POND and other donors as well. A lot of development is ahead, so not to speak only about challenges. We started also good things, and people supported the work, but a lot is still ahead. And we're just continuing the hard work, and the whole team is motivated and dedicated. 1 year ago, I was employed. 1 year before that, the director was the single employee. Then a year after that, me and my colleague here were employed, and now we have a staff of 20 people, which is a huge achievement and a very dynamic year behind us. The development is ahead of us, and from zero, we tend to continue, so please do support us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anela. Definitely, you will all agree that it was worth waiting 8 hours to listen to this presentation, definitely. So, actually, we're at the end of our presentations. According to our agenda, we just postponed dinner at 8, so at 7:30 there will be buses waiting from us. So they are already waiting for us just to take to the restaurant for dinner, which is the restaurant Metropole, which is about 12 minutes away from here. So afterwards, when we finish, so whoever wants to go by food, of course, you are welcome, but the buses will be waiting in front of the hotel, so the dinner will be ready at 8 o'clock, just for logistics. But before we conclude our meeting, I just want to give just 10-15 minutes for questions and answers. I apologize that at the end of the sessions I could not give opportunity to the participants to give the floor for questions because we were so in an intensive mode of working. So basically now the floor is yours. If you have any questions to any speakers, we can use